Hi, everyone. It's Raghu, and I'm back with David Silver, and David is the OG of Mindrolling with me, and I'm glad you agreed to come back after a little. I mean, it's nice and regular now. Seeing every couple of months or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, without any design on anybody's part, by the way.
Yeah, right.
It's
Yeah.
I think it was a couple of months.
Actually, we talk because we're friends and we talk all the time. And yeah. Oh, did you see the this book from this Rinpoche or this or that or the other? And it absolutely gives us inspiration to
Well, no,
share.
it does. I mean, we've been doing this for half a century.
No, no.
It's true.
Okay, now it's not half a century. It's like 6, 7 years, 8 years, maybe.
Oh no, I don't. I don't mean mind rolling. I mean
Oh.
swapping information.
Oh yeah. Right.
No, but seriously, it is a conversation. I like podcasts that are continuing conversations, and there are a few that I've heard where there's no, like what Duncan Trussell calls it cadence. The cadence of news reading, the cadence of podcasting.
Yeah.
You can't trust any of
it. Yeah, that is true. And yes, well, I got all of that from Duncan. And it did, for me, it harked back to when I was doing radio back in the late 60s, early 70s, for a couple of years there. And here, so everybody, let's not get in too much disarray here, but David and we've come across, and I came across it first, a book called Sacred Knowledge, and it's Psychedelics and Religious Experiences, and it's by William A. Richards, an incredible intellect. Really, I mean, and he has a way to put things in context and using words that really help to describe some of the processes that one goes through with psychedelics, and then also relating it to the history, of all the people that really were prominent to experiment with psychedelics. So, and we'll refer to the book, and we're just going to talk about it through our own experience, but Dave, actually, I haven't told you this, but as I'm reading some of the descriptions in the book around ineffability, it's ineffable, you can't really talk about it, and all of the descriptions, time and space no longer exists in that moment. They all were directly what we, and I say we, those of the Westerners that went and met Neem Karoli Baba in the early 70s, those words, which he's using to basically describe the mystical experience, maybe not just psychedelics, and that was existent in the context of this being. So, it just further validates it. It was pretty amazing.
Just to point, that up a little, in the book, he has 5 major,
Dave, you're going to have to, speak in and, into the mic so we can hear you.
I can't find it. I will find it.
What is it?
Yeah, I didn't read the book fully yet, but I've read some of all your notes and some of the book.
Yeah.
And what I liked about it was that it was like you or I or people we know are talking rather than in a very, sort of serious and very, not that things aren't serious about it, but it's just really well written. It sounds like a voice talking about experiences we all had. And he's probably of our age, sort of, maybe a bit younger. But, it did, it inspired in me memories that were there, but were good ones. And the way he describes the experience, and he finishes with ineffability, if you remember, there are 5 ways of doing this. One is, it makes you feel like you're in a dimension, a better one maybe, for a moment or a lot of moments. And then it makes you positive and compassionate. It's not all about vision. It's not all about, and it's certainly not all about fancy flowers and and stuff like that, which he could be if you were looking at one. But he makes it clear that it's about a perspective and a great shift in the way you perceive what you're experiencing here.
Yeah.
Fantastic. He's very good. Yeah, he is.
Yeah. But here's what he says, what this is all about for him, this book that he wrote and what all of the research and so on that he spent a lot of time at. He says at the core of the book, it's about the nature and relevance of mystical consciousness and the visionary experiences that sometimes precede, follow, or accompany this unspeakably vast, dynamic, magnificent, and profoundly meaningful state of awareness. It's a form of consciousness that vividly remains in the memory banks of those who witness it or claim to die into it and be reborn after, that goes by many names, such as ultimate reality, cosmic consciousness, the eternal core of being, or the source of the perennial philosophy. So some of the descriptions, and he liked, actually what he liked was this term, pure consciousness event, PCE. It includes descriptions of unity, transcendence of time and space, intuitive knowledge, sacredness, deeply felt positive mood, and ineffability, all experiential categories that subsequently he explores in depth in the rest of this book, which is those descriptions, those 5, 6 descriptions were what it just dawned on me. God, that's exactly what I was going through when I first met Neem Karoli Baba, who, I don't know as everybody knows, but I don't know who, those of you who are listening or watching, Ram Dass gave Neem Karoli Baba a bunch. I mean, he said, do you have any of that medicine? And he thought he needed aspirin or something. And Ram Dass said, oh, yeah, you mean acid? And he had some orange sunshine, which I later, we're talking about 600 micrograms per dose. And he took a bunch of tabs and threw it in, and basically nothing happened except that he said, this is good for beginners. Takes you into darshan, meaning being in the presence of Christ. And then you got to come back after a few hours. Better to love serve people. Something like that. I don't remember exactly what he said in that moment. But ultimately, it gave credence. Obviously, Ram Dass has spent a whole career with Leary at Harvard and so on, and everything that ensued. And this was a big event for him in that moment, which is why it happened. So, it just struck me, the similar, and it strikes me too, David is very close to Shirdi Sai Baba, who is basically, he and Maharaj-ji were so extraordinarily similar in the way that they taught without teaching. And I know just from reading some of the books about Shirdi, you could say the same thing about him in terms of, even through just reading the book, you get that sense of timelessness, of awe, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the the display of certain cities, which aren't the be all and end all of faith and love, compassion, and but they are a trigger. And I've had incredible experiences with Shirdi Sai Baba. One morning, I had a very clear dream, of a small village, which I soon learned was Shirdi in India. And I knew of Shirdi. It wasn't like I knew, but I had a dream of it. I never dreamt about it before. And Shirdi Sai Baba was there, and he was grinding some grain. I'm not sure what kind, millet or wheat, in a big pot in the dream, and arguing with some women who were standing there telling him not to do it. And then he said, spread this all around the village. and there'll be no cholera in this village. There was a cholera outbreak in the region. That was my dream. The next day, I went to the Sacharita, which is the story of Shirdi Sai Baba, one of the most authentic ones. And I just opened it just to see what, and I actually opened it on that exact event, which was written very objectively in the book about everybody was scared about cholera. And Shirdi said, don't worry about it. I'm just going to spread this stuff around. Just the women and the men here, take some of it in your hands and spread it all around the village and it won't come in here. And that's what I dreamed the night before. And I'm not subject to too much of that.
Psychic.
But I need, cities work on me. It's sort of okay to say the biggest city is the miracle of love, of course, as Ramdas said. But sometimes people like me are dense enough to need a shot in the arm, which, to get back to my original sort of experience with psychedelics was so incredible because right at the start of it, in 1966 for me, I met Timothy Leary in Boston, and he was in a fierce debate with a professor of dentistry, no less, from Tufts. Tufts has a very good dental department. I was a teacher at Tufts at the time, so I was invited, and of course I wanted to go. And I went, and it was a marvelous debate. It was marvelous. He was incredible. That's all I can say. The most charismatic person I had ever come in contact with at that point in my life when I was 23. And then at the end of it, he said, if anybody wanted to talk further about this, he was talking about psilocybin more than acid, just stand around and wait and we'll talk. So I did. And contrary to one's image of him, he was wearing a 3-piece light gray Prince of Wales suit and looked like a diplomat rather than Timothy Leary, He just was very impressive and incredibly respectful to the place where the town hall it was, I think. Town or whatever the place is there. Anyway, so I met him back then, and he said in that little thing after the lecture that as long as you can perceive a chemical or some kind of catalyst as sacramental, you won't go wrong. And from that moment on, he was like amazingly effective on me because that was it for me. The word sacramental, I don't think I'd ever used it. And suddenly I got it, that you needed this catalyst in order to go somewhere that you couldn't go without it. And that was the power and the wonder of psychedelics back then, because people, him and Ramdas and Ralph Metzner and others, John Lennon and others, all of them made it clear that this was a gateway to some form of shift in your awareness and perception and sense of consciousness. And that's immediately what it was for me. It was never anything else. I mean, I read about people having orgies and eating a lot and painting, all kinds of stuff and everything. And I thought, good God, it's enough for me to just sit here still for the next 8 hours. And it's like a circus of knowledge coming in. And it's all sacred, as the writer says in the book, that the experience, if one can't make it sacred, then it might not do much for you except make you a little crazy. But if you go from that point, which Leary pointed out from the start, I mean, people who said he was irresponsible or not telling the truth, he always said there's a way of doing this that's sensible in terms of dosage, in terms of the company you're keeping, and in terms of setting. And that was from the start. That's not something he made up to rationalize behavior. He did that with his students and psilocybin right at the beginning. But the sacramental aspect of it would change my life totally. Totally. I was not, I'd never experienced anything like what Raghu was just listing, the ineffable and all that. And then suddenly, the first time that I took LSD, everything changed instantaneously. It was ridiculous. Within 3 minutes, my entire life changed because the ground left under my feet. I felt helpless and panicky, and then suddenly I felt like I was in another dimension that was far, far more interesting than just sitting in a room in Cambridge, Mass. I was gone, and I never came back. I did, but people talk about it as if you have flash. They used to say in those
This
days,
is you're an endorsement of psychedelics from David Silver. You can write to him at.
No, it's not actually, because the last time I took acid was 1972, which is a hot
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, I stopped. I did it for 5 years, and then I stopped. I don't need this anymore. It's so powerful. I can just go think, and it was great. I mean, look, it is a chemical, and Leary always used to say, "I don't mind it being called a chemical, just don't call it a drug."
Yeah.
It's not a drug.
Yeah.
It's a gateway, and it's a gateway to some place we all enjoy at least thinking we're going to.
I just thinking about this wonderful psychedelic experience you had the first time you did it, which I could say pretty much the same. But then there was a time a little later on where that's why Maharaj-ji taking like 3 or 4 or 5, 600 micro, it's unimaginable. And, it's proof that what's inside, as when you are no longer polarized and attached to anything, everything is part of that one thing. So he was proof of that. And then, and these descriptions of what most people at some point or another, if they're having a journey that is really well guided and well planned, and sacramental is the big word, right? Sacrament is the word to refer to. So one time it was really cold out, I remember, in Montreal, and someone gave us some Czechoslovakian acid. Right.
Really?
Apparently it was like a Sandoz thing, apparently. And I decided, I don't know why, I'll take 2, and it's certainly the strongest trip that I ever had by far, but it went wacky. I mean, really wacky. Like I went to my friend and I said, "Are we okay?" And he looked at me and he went, "I don't know." That was it. Forget
Absolutely
it.
right. Yeah.
Next thing I know, and I'm just really flipped out, but not paying a lot of attention to how flipped out I was. And I ended up in a club in Montreal. And who was playing there? The Fugs.
Oh, my
Very
goodness.
few of you out there that are listening or watching this will remember the Fugs. David, you, Tuli Cooperberg, and company, poets. And so who was the other guy in it?
Tuli Kuffenberg. Ed Sanders.
Ed Sanders, yeah. So Ed Sanders was actually giving fellatio to his microphone as I was walking and completely flipped out. That alone, that got me completely straight. In that moment, I was fine.
Yeah. I mean, the whole era was a trip, really, when you think about it. So we added to that the intensity of actually tripping on a trip that would seem to be your life at that point. Because you just didn't know what was going to happen next in the culture.
Yeah.
But, it is important that, I think it's the Mormons, the Church of Latter-day, whatever the name is, the real name, Latter-day Saints, they're the ones that actually invented the term articles of faith. And they have a slightly different meaning from any that I have, but I like the expression, which is that there are certain things that you experience in your life that help you with your faith quotient at certain times really powerfully. And what I mean by that is, when I had my 4 or 5 years of taking acid fairly regularly, I haven't forgotten that. What I experience really informs my present. And that's what articles of faith are all about for me. So epiphanies are not just sort of existential. They live out of time and space. They're in your past, you're living in the present, but they're forming your brain circuitry and your your neurological reality. Certainly not your neuropathy. Right now. So these articles of faith, these epiphanies, you knew when you were having them that you would think about them. that they would come back in a very good way. At certain times when you were in the sort of in the depths of doubt or of adverse circumstances, or the things that happen in one's life that really make you crazy, make you depressed, you don't know. These things are not, you don't have to take acid to get them. But if you happen to have done that one or other ones, I think if you did it in the way that it's supposed to be done, it will always come back to you as a remembered epiphany, a recalled epiphany, an article of faith, which can then transmute your disposition in the present. And that's, that's like what, people talk about religious, mystical experiences, but these are just chemical changes that bring about a very different sense of oneness, namely of oneness. And therefore, at first,
unity.
But at first it's very disorienting. I mean, I that's why LSD and such have to be in the hands of people who are really concerned about the people's welfare who are sitting with them to do this. Otherwise, don't do it. I mean, don't do it. It's too strong.
This is what William says. What makes the responsible use of psychedelic substances so important, however, is that it provides, this is key to everything we've been saying, reliability and potency. Just think about it. For the first time in the history of science, these two factors allow these revelatory states of consciousness and any changes in physical or mental health or in attitudes of behavior that may follow them to be studied carefully and systematically within the context of academic research, which is going on now. No longer is the study of mysticism limited to the scholarly scrutiny of historical documents, such as the beautiful, expressive writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, Meister Eckhart, Rumi, or Shankara, nor is it limited to the noble attempts to express the subtle shifts of awareness encountered in meditative disciplines within the structural limitations of human language. I love that. Profoundly sacred experiences are now occurring in the laboratories of medical professionals and social scientists. And I'm like, okay, I've always poo-pooed, I like the one thing, MAPS and everything they're doing and they had been doing in terms of the research, all taking place in a very antiseptic environment and in hospitals and so on and so forth. This puts a little bit of a different light that these sacred experiences are occurring in laboratories of medical professionals, etc. That starts to change the game, really change the game. Because, we need for these elements and substances to be legitimized so people can take advantage of them. And of course, that's what MAPS has been trying to do for many years and had this little bit of a pushback, shall we say, last fall when they got denied to be able to legally do that kind of therapy with psilocybin, with MDMA. It was MDMA, which is far less threatening to anyone in terms of what they're concerned about, mental health and so on. But still needs to have that. I love what Leary said to you, needs to have it as a sacrament. It really does. So here, the other thing, interesting, the mystery that we are, William talks about. I mean, why are we doing these things? Why did we do it back then? For me, I was pretty miserable, had no idea what reality was, and I was aware of the fact that I had no idea. And through music and through my interest in the East, I guess, I started investigating a little bit, and then acid came along. And that opened the doors of perceptions, as Aldous Huxley wrote. But I don't know, when you really think about it, everybody, who's listening or watching, why are we doing anything that is mind manifesting, to look deeper into our innate goodness, our innate reality. I mean, that's a really good reason for any of the meditation, chant, whatever it may be. The power of psychedelics to open that door, as Maharaj-ji said, is inestimable.
Yeah, because you're feeling, there comes a moment when some people, a large number of people in the 60s and since, realize that the social systems, the propaganda, the political ideal, all of it is affecting the way you look at the world in these constructs that are uncomfortable and give you anxiety and even dread. And back in those days, there was a real link between the darkness that was going on in the world, just like now, and finding another place to go that's not illusory, but is actually deeper, And that was part of my thing. And of everyone I knew was that you didn't take these substances because you wanted to sort of, maybe you thought you were just going to get higher than you ever did on something else.
Yeah,
but
right.
once you started taking them, the high word didn't work. It was a complete shift in the way you felt things and saw things and changed you deeply. And of course, there came a point for me in 1972 when I stopped that I realized I didn't want to do it anymore because it was no longer having that exact thing. It was more of a drug. You take it.
Okay, I have to interrupt you.
Yes.
You have taken psychedelic medicine after 1972.
Oh, yeah, but not chemicals.
Okay, I mean, we're talking about psychedelics, so you try to parse
Okay. Then let me talk about it then. I'll do it.
All right.
You enjoy my stories, and basically what happened to me was, I don't know whether anyone else was, I stopped taking acid in 1972. In 1973, I was fortunate enough to be invited to an amazing ceremony in South Dakota by the Brule Sioux Indian shamans, who were the greatest peyote shamans in the United States, apart from some in the Navajo and Hopi tribes. And this happened. Should I tell this? Yeah, I should.
Absolutely. That's what we're talking about.
Okay. What happened was I was living on West 79th Street in New York City, and a friend of mine, Mark, said there was going to be a ceremony in a beautiful apartment on 87th Street, I think, on West End Avenue, where a very great Brule Sioux shaman was going to, medicine man was going to come and show us how to do peyote and so forth. He asked if we could have, and this sounds weird these days, but he did, one African American, one Asian person, one Caucasian person, and another person. And they chose me to be the white person. And I went, and it was divided 50-50 men and women also. That was part of it. And it was fantastic. Okay. We did peyote, not that much of it. And then Leonard Crodog, the shaman medicine man, led us through an experience that was phenomenal, beyond words, ineffable beyond words, and in another dimension completely beyond words. And then you're not allowed to drink anything or eat anything. You just take the peyote. And it's quite difficult in some ways. Okay. In the morning, we went on the roof of this building on the Upper West Side and looked at the sun come up. And it was extraordinarily beyond, just overwhelming, sublime. About, 9 months after that, I received an invitation from Leonard Crodog and his father, Henry Crodog, to come to a very great celebration on the Roosevelt Reservation in South Dakota. And I went with 3 other people, my wife, a very marvelous man I got a lot of knowledge from. He was a Comanche Indian, and we went out together. And what it was the 50th anniversary of Henry Crodog and Mary Crodog's wedding. Henry Crodog was the first shaman in the Native American church, which was established in the 1920s, I guess. And his son was also this. And so I went, and there was a gigantic hogan in the middle of the reservation, which is a huge building built for a fire. It's round, and this had layers of seats and a gigantic hole in the ceiling. And it fitted, I think it was 420 people. And all 420 people took a large amount of peyote. There were 10 medicine men from different tribes there. And we had a collective experience, okay? So it wasn't like having a vision or a hallucination or something you doubt. Everybody had the same experiences when we were in there. And I'm just going to say this, that we took the equivalent of 28 buttons, which is a lot, each, which were administered by these young Sioux men. And then after a while, the fire started burning. There were 3 people in a peyote meeting. There's a roadman, a fire chief, and a water woman. And the roadman guides you through various disciplines during the experience. And the fire chief keeps the fire going. But after about 2 hours of this, the people I was with, we were sitting together, suddenly all saw together and started looking at each other like, oh my God. Because it wasn't just a trip. We were all seeing it. The fire chief blew into this fire, which was a roaring fire, about 12, 15 feet wide, a roaring fire. And he just went like this, a little puff, like he would, a little puff. And the fire became huge momentarily. And we all went, oh my. And then shortly after that, he looked at us and smiled, and then with his hands, moved his hands and did a bigger puff and said the Lakota word for eagle. And a gigantic eagle came out of the fire, made of fire. And Ronnie, my wife, and I were just like holding each other because we were seeing miracles of a profound nature in front of us, and we all were. And then he said, I was told later in Lakota, that he wanted to show some of the ancestors. So at the top of the fire, he sculpted with his hands faces of Native Americans from the past in the Brule Sioux ancestry. And we all saw them. And again, my life completely metamorphosed right there, forever and ever, because I saw things that no human sees unless you sort of want to or something. God knows why I was there. But
yeah, you, a little Jewish guy from London.
Okay, there's an end to the story. So we did all that, and we were all completely mind-blown beyond description. Everybody, including a lot of the Native Americans who were there, who were people that would have been invited, but they hadn't seen anything quite like this. I stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks in a beautiful teepee. And one early morning, I was sleeping. We all slept with our heads on the side and our feet kind of together. These are the people I came with in one teepee. And one morning, the flap opened, and Henry Crow Dog, the chief of the tribe, came in and said to me, he said, David, get up. And I was sleepy, and I said, what? He said, get up. And he really took notice of this dude. So I got up and put my pants on, follow me. So I followed him, and we went deep into the woods, away from where the little houses and teepees were, into a dense part of the woods. And I thought, what? And he doesn't say anything to me. And I said, where are we going, Henry? You see. And he wouldn't say anything. And we got to a clearing with large trees around it. And he said, I spent much time, St. Mark's Place, New York City. Most people don't believe in my magic. Do you? And I hesitated. He said, oh, I show you my magic. And he twirled. He was 70 at the time. He twirled like a ballet dancer. And then he came back, and he had the face of a 25-year-old Henry Crow Dog right there in front of me. And it took about a city. And he said, young Henry. And he said, don't be sick. Don't do nothing problem. This is easy. And he ran across a clearing, and there was an axe that I didn't know was right there. that he went to, a big MF of an axe, and hit a tree and cut it down in like a minute. Like bum, 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 like that. And then he ran at me as young Henry, and then he did another twirl, and he went back to being 70. And he said, "Now you see magic." And I couldn't speak. I was unable to articulate the language for the first time in my life. I just, my God. So
You were the only one there?
Yes, I was.
Just you and the shaman?
Just me and the dude.
Wow.
I mean, he was crazy, man. He called me Custer all the time because I had hair to my shoulders, and he would just say, "Come here, Custer." He made me crazy. Because they were going to kill me. But Henry was a great old-fashioned shaman, but he was also very, very funny. So he'd be singing some Lakota song, with his he had a beat-up acoustic guitar, which is very good actually, and he'd be doing some Lakota thing, and then he'd break into what did he used to do? He used to do. Jumpin' Jack Flash by the Stones out of nowhere.
Really?
This was a shaman. This is a man who was a shapeshifter. Obviously, it's the only shapeshifting thing I've ever actually experienced. And
wow.
I was very upset that I wasn't with you guys in northern India, but I had my moment with these sacramental events that were psychedelic, peyote. My goodness me, Anyway, that's the end of that.
All one. That's all we got. You got the same thing. I mean, and that's the reality, and that's what psychedelics open the door to. I have a nice quote from Teilhard de Chardin.
Oh.
He's the Jesuit. He was a paleontologist. I didn't know that. He suggests that we are all actually spiritual beings who are currently having physical or human experience. And he called matter the divine milieu. In the milieu means in the midst of. And and he wrote this incredible poetic essay called "The Spiritual Power of Matter." This is really really great insight into reality, actually, in my mind. And he says, "Son of man, bathe yourself in the ocean of matter, plunge into it where it is deepest and most violent. Struggle in its currents and drink of its waters, for it cradled you long ago in your pre-conscious existence. And it is that ocean that will raise you up to God." What a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah. What is a paleontologist? Is it a person who goes after geology and stones and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Artifacts and stuff.
Yeah. Well, that sort of says it all. When you think about it, he really just, it's we get back to the ineffability word, but as much as some people like him are capable of conjuring up what it is without, with words. But it isn't that in the word. Those are words, but they help.
Yeah.
They're articles of faith.
Yeah,
you read something, it changes you around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And he talks of, and we are referring to this, the mystics past and present are not only those who have glimpsed an ultimate eternal harmony and somehow managed to remember it. Many of them are also known to have returned to the simple disciplines of everyday existence, chop wood and carry water. That is, to have become incarnate in the world and grounded within time. To give some insight into that reality of who we are. That matter, we come in and what everything that presents itself to us is perfect to basically allow us to transform into freedom from suffering. Ramdas used to talk all the time, suffering brings me closer to God, which actually came from Maharaj-ji. And but we used to talk about it because it can be a real left around spiritual bypass, you know. But we used to talk about it in the way that you have this perspective that you are using everything in incarnate existence to be able to transform oneself. And again, what gets you to that perspective, that you even have regard for wanting to go deeper into that reality? And this certainly, psychedelics, certainly opens the door in a very profound way, obviously. He talks about Hermann Hesse, and remember we did that podcast around Hermann Hesse, by the way, if people
Yes.
want, who wrote these great book, Journey to the East. It's often hard, he says, to recognize the enlightened minds around us, sometimes instead of being highly credentialed academic or religious leaders. They could be garbage men, cleaning lady, or the checkout clerk at the supermarket. And I can remember stories of Neem Karoli Baba, who, one from Dada Mukherjee, he was supposed, Maharaj-ji, which what we call him, was supposed to come to Dada's to spend some time there and never showed up. Thought it was kind of, I wonder what happened. Not in the days, there was no cell phones or anything. There were telephones. That afternoon, a stray dog came and Dada fed it and gave it some milk or something. And when Maharaji finally showed up, he said, "You took care. That's so great. You took care of that dog. And you never know what form God comes in to give you darshan." Right? So, yeah, that really points.
See, these are great things without psychedelics, but the thing is, for some of us, we needed psychedelics to even have a grasp of that.
Yeah, to get to that perspective.
I mean, to get to what you said before, what brings us to that point? I don't know. It's like this, it's certainly a sense of dislocation with the society and the social system you're brought up in. And that can help because when you think about it, the Buddha left, the palace because he felt there was something missing. There was something in him that wasn't in other princes, other royalty, other, sort of Nepo kids, as it were, Buddha just knew there was something missing. So he left the palace. And that is a metaphor also for wanting to take a transformative, epiphany-creating substance in order to do what? In order to see beyond this enormously complex set of constructs that are the society around you. And knowing that it may take a lecture that you go to, and you may never need any of that. I know lots of people who didn't take psychedelics who have these presentiments.
Exactly.
But for me, I just know that without the peyote experience and other ones, I would be, I think, a little bit lost more than I am, because they make you understand that people misunderstood the whole thing in many ways in the time, in the 60s. Those that were opposed to it, and there were many that were opposed to it, said, who wants to go into this hallucinogenic world? It's not real. But the actual opposite seemed to be true, that what the psychedelic experience was, that it gave you insight and entree into a world that made this one like a movie, just like a movie.
But what you said, yeah. What you say is so true. And this is mentioned in this, in his book. Some people are comfortable with awesome, awe-inspiring. And in his mind, it was the intuitive sense of respectful, hushed sensitivity, often expressed in silence, that most people seem to experience when they enter a high nave of a Gothic cathedral. or a
Yes.
spacious mosque with a beautiful interior dome. Perhaps the environmental perceptions somehow resonate intuitively within our nervous systems, evoking a feeling of reverence, quite independent of whatever affiliations we may have with organized religious institutions. Some may encounter similar intuitive feelings when looking at the Milky Way on a clear night, when watching a spectacular sunrise or sunset you just described in that peyote experience, when holding the hand of a beloved person at the moment of death, or when first embracing a newborn child. Everyone, in my mind, I mean, we may put them in a recess of our mind because it was such a powerful experience that you push it away. But the reality is we've all had that kind of experience, that transcendental of the moment experience. And then again, okay, well, we've had it. We kind of have not, it has not made the life-changing move, so to speak, because we've buried it for whatever reason. It may just bring up too much sensitivity in the moment, and that's possible. But then you go back to the motivation of, I really want to find out what is the ground of my being that is not subject to all the reactivity, to the to the opposites in life, terrible suffering, big joy. What is it that's behind all of that? From that perspective, I'd like to see about that. So psychedelics certainly make sense in that way because they're so powerful in such a compact amount of time to produce the kinds of revelations that really make a difference in one's life.
Yeah, and the parallels with non-psychedelic experience are interesting too. Like I was working in Oklahoma in the late 90s on a few projects, and I met this. He was actually kind of an evangelical minister, but a really sweet person. And he asked me if he could ask me questions about the psychedelic experience. And we were in a recording studio at the time in a break. And I told him everything that I could think of at that time. And he just listened. He didn't interrupt me or anything. He just didn't. And then at the end of it, he went, okay, I think I get it. I'm so glad we had this conversation because I've thought about this. And I didn't want to take it, but I wondered how close it was to my experience with Christ. I just wondered whether it was the same thing or something like it or something like that. And I now feel that it is. That's what you just said to me. I said, well, that's for you to say, really. But it was so fascinating because he was a very straight person and a very, Christian teacher, if you like. But he was able to get it. He didn't judge it or anything, which proves something about him. That he knew what it was because of some of the people who'd spoken about it, and he was impressed by the rapture of it. I don't mean rapture with a capital R.
Yeah.
I mean, just my goodness, these people are experiencing something which is akin to what a true mystical experience with a Christian icon, a saint, or even Jesus himself. Those are transformative experiences that you cannot forget and you don't want to forget. And what I was speaking about to him, and I've forgotten exactly what it was, but I really worked at it with him to tell him that the images that people had of psychedelic usage were just mixed in with a lot of other hippie stuff and stereotyped hippie stuff and a lot of indulgence and a lot of this and a lot of that. But for most of us who continued to take it for a while to study it and so forth, it was not about that at all. It was about opening that door. And there was a bolt on the door, and strong ones like psilocybin acid, peyote, ayahuasca, whatever, they are a skeleton key, he says in the book, a skeleton key that opens all doors if you know how to use it. So a lot of it is what you put into it. That's the other thing about it. When you have a psychedelic experience, it will reflect to some extent what you're already striving or craving, be it spiritual, and hopefully it is. Like, let me say, the very first time I took it, lysergic acid, I was near an aquarium, and I was looking at the little fish, and there were little fish that you just don't think about. I mean, who thinks about little fish a lot? You know, fishermen maybe to kill them, but I don't think about fish a lot. Although fish is the designated symbol for Christianity, by the way. However, I'm looking at these fish floating around, and when I started peeking on the acid, I have never seen anything that I found to be a more sweet thing than a little fish with his eyes looking around and just flapping around in the water and slowly going around. It sounds so prosaic in a way. But the fact that it was so prosaic, just a little fish in a fairly small aquarium, and the amount of love that I felt for that being was unlike any love I'd ever felt, really, honestly. And that was just the first actual thing I looked at when on that first experience with the psychedelic, were those fish. Well, I looked at my wife, but then after my wife, I looked at the fish, and then we both looked at the fish and said, "Aren't they just remarkable?" Well, you know, that's goes back to Ram Dass and his marvelous, incredibly lucid description of everything is God and everything is equally remarkable, no matter what you think. And that's what I felt at that moment in 1968. And you know, I think I remember this stuff all the time. And the truth is, people may usually forget everything. Well, I forget most things, but none of those things. They're crystal clear in my mind because they were so effective in changing a really stuck person into a somewhat less stuck person.
Yeah, right. This is interesting. He said that there's no question that there really is a summit to the mountain, that the perspective from the pinnacle is worth all the effort and anguish of the spiritual journey, and that the journey itself has meaning. Many who are now committed to disciplined meditative practices and compassionate action, some of whom might well decline an opportunity to receive an entheogen, psychedelic, even if it were legally accessible, will also acknowledge that their interest in spiritual development was originally awakened or significantly nurtured by an experience occasioned by a psychedelic substance. True, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah.
Again, we this is not supporting going out and an advertisement for psychedelics and supporting going out and just randomly doing it. But it's like everything. Everything has to be. Everything
quote
is
from
sacred.
Harry Dass. You know that quote about people that spiritual enlightenment quickly, and they think if it goes away quickly, they don't have it. It's like he said. It's like waiting for a bus. You wait for the bus, you know it's going to come, but you wait and then you wait until it comes. And then when you get on it, you learn what it's like to be on a bus. But until the bus comes, now the other thing is you have to be at the bus stop. What does that mean? It means that when you take these substances, you must have the right atmosphere, the right people with you, and the right reason for doing it. The raison d'etre for doing it will guide it to where it wants to go. But I agree with Raghu making this point that, you know, these things have to be thought very carefully about. This is not a recreational drug, no matter what anyone says, it is not. If you take it like that, God help you.
Well,
sorry, but I mean, not God help you, but I mean, just be careful.
People have a lot of fun at these beautiful summer festivals and raves and electronic music and so on. You get into a trance, and it's pretty.
No, I know, but still be careful.
You went wildly from one thing into this.
Well, I was careful. I mean, I just think that you have to be careful what you do with your neurons. I mean, you do. Because you've got to know who the person is giving it to you and what. I mean, stuff like that, very basic stuff about just taking care not to be casual or flippant about this. It just isn't, a glass of beer.
The metaphor of everything, the paths, come closer to one another as the summit is approached of the mountain. So it's possible for a Christian to worship genuinely in a Hindu temple, a Jew to bow to Allah in an Islamic mosque, a Buddhist to recite a Taoist prayer, or any other combination. As soon as I read that, I mean, this is all part of the experience of this. My first memory of the psychedelic, the first time I did it, which was around the time you did it. Mine was more like 67.
I think maybe mine was 67 too, now that I'm thinking about
Summer
it.
of
The
Love.
Summer of, yeah.
Unity, complete unity. And I remember the deep sense of okayness around that unity, that no matter what, it was all absolutely, we are part of a fabric, and love is the makeup of that fabric. That was my first experience of acid. And interestingly enough, not too long ago, now I don't think this can be considered a psychedelic, but for me it has been. I had to get some teeth, molars removed at the dentist. I was going to India, so they said, we're just going to take these out. And I said, that sounds painful. He said, well, I had it done, and I just had some gas, no problem, nitrous oxide. So I said, can I have that? And he said, yeah, sure. So a couple of days later, popped in there. He comes in, he puts the mask on, does the whole thing, and he says, listen, and I have to go, I fit you into a schedule, and I have to go elsewhere to perform some surgery. I'll be back. Gone for like 20, 25 minutes, and I'm sitting there and he was very generous with the gas, had total darshan of Neem Karoli Baba, of Maharaj-ji, and had that unity that I was talking about. He actually expressed it in the way that I knew that no matter how I was screwing up in all the different ways I screw up, or how much I believed my thoughts or the story I tell myself, as we all do, no matter what, it had no relation to divinity, the spirit whatsoever. Okay. This was just the BS. You know what Maharaj-ji said to us? I've done everything for you. I leave you the mind. And that would just reinforce that in that moment for me. But yeah, the unity was definitely. And so I was trying to say what this passage reminded me of was Shirdi Baba, who was all about just absolutely torturing. He had devotees that were Hindu, and he had devotees that were Muslim. In fact, nobody really knew where he came from. And he would make each group go into the respective other temple or mosque, right?
He was unbelievable. I mean, he just broke all the rules in order to show people that these were, man-made constructs, and they were fine, they were great. He loved the Islamic thing, he loved the Hindu thing, but don't judge the other one. And he would get angry at people. I mean, from what I read, he had a certain moment when he would just say, you can't act like that. You can't act like that towards a Muslim brother or sister. Yeah, it ultimately comes down to that, doesn't it? All these divisions and epiphanies and cities and everything. The ultimate thing is to feel that love of unity. And that's what Maharaj-ji spread to everyone who came into contact with him, every single person, I'm sure. And so for me, honestly, just hearing the stories are enough to set it off, because, it has that impact. It's all of these things that, if we're going to go back to psychedelics as such, they transmit something that is different to every person, obviously, because we're coming into it with different karma and different memories and different conditioning and different whatever. But it will, if you can relax into it and if you're in the right environment for it, make you feel that humans are blessed creatures. So yes, to your point, which is very well taken about the raves and everything, if anyone thinks that I'm just a serious old codger, I'm not. I love that kind of, but I just, the care is just the care in the world full of, in this part of the 21st century, there's a lot of scamming going on, a lot of fentanyl, a lot of rubbish, and a lot of hurtful stuff. And one just has to be careful about that, particularly if you don't have experience in any of these areas. But the actual rave, the word rave itself is a good word for, you become a raving lover of love itself and of everyone and everything as long as you can maintain it. As you said at the beginning of the podcast, we can go up and down about this and wonder why can't we get that feeling back? Well, we can and do. We do all the time by the way we act. I mean, I don't think it's too radical to say that most of the things that I do now I wouldn't be doing if I hadn't have taken these substances and become more aware, at least more aware, that we're not all separate objects looking at each other like some kind of game. It's not like that. And that's what all of the psychedelics and the shamans that guided one in the psychedelic experience, like in my film about Timothy Leary, Yoko's in the film, and I remember when we were filming her, and she said that Timothy Leary was a person, she knew him very well, and she was always there, that attracted a beautiful, beautiful vibration. And the kind of people turned up, and then she said, like Ram Dass, he came. And I liked it. I loved it when she said that, because she was saying that this man was not an irresponsible partier. He wasn't just a guy that was just trying to be something, out of the ordinary and get people to pay attention to him. He had a sort of a mission, and the mission was open up your eyes and awaken. And he did that. It worked against all odds. I mean, the media wasn't into him at all. There was enormous amounts of negative stuff said about him all the time.
To this day.
To this day, right. So he broke through by showing people that the whole thing was actually about awakening them and allowing them into a more blessed feeling of self-awareness, as it were. Yeah.
Wow, we're pretty much at the end of our show.
Did we do what we're supposed to do here?
I don't know. We just do what you and I do. It is just sharing.
I know, but it's these endless stories that I thought. I mean, I feel when I hear my voice telling them, it's like, yeah, but let me just say about that, and this and everyone knows, but I'm just going to repeat it. The word Maharaj-ji, if you don't know, can apply to a Mahasiddha saint avatar, or it can apply to a street sweeper. In India, and ergo, the epiphanies that I talk about have often been experienced by people who didn't take psychedelics and don't even know what they are. So this is not a necessity ever. But for those of us that had access to it and there was a good vibe around it, it was the most beautiful thing. End of preach.
I'm going to end with this. This is some actually. A poem from a woman minister who received LSD and wrote kind of a poem. Well, it's very long, so I'm just going to quote a little bit of it. This is her description: vastness, incredible luminescent light, a different radiant quality here, never seen before, filled all space, exquisite, beyond description, unforgettable, magnificent, power-friendly power. Power-friendly power. Then mountains of flames of fire, indestructible fire, like Moses unconsumed a burning bush. I could have walked through these friendly flames unharmed. Magnificent light. Oneness, all one. In Godness, indescribable, utmost, emotionless, no self, no sensation. Self was within and without. Time gone, space gone, nowhere but infinitely everywhere. No time but eternally now. No wholly other or beyond, but in it, in the infinite, in the eternal and infinite, in mystery, part of it, all one. Sub ek. So my whole thing about it in the beginning, that all these different descriptions seem to be a good description for our experience being with this particular being, and the fact that there is no difference, that he himself consumed this without anything happening, meaning there was no more polarization for anything to happen like that. And here, you know, we're really speaking to the efficacy, obviously. And we haven't talked at all about the therapeutic qualities of some of these entheogens, which is extraordinarily important for so many people, all the way down just to simple darkness, depression, you know, and how effective the experiments have been around, particularly around MDMA and psilocybin. So I think, yeah, this deserves the respect of what these powerful medicines can do for us. And then outside of the therapeutic platform, there's what we really have been discussing here, Dave, which is the efficacy of finding out who we truly are and having a perspective that allows us to see the world quite differently. Which is why in the 60s, whatever, hey, let's put it in the water. Okay, that'll fix everything. Ram Dass actually said in a talk, what we were so naively doing in the 60s when we found all this freedom through psychedelics and sexual freedom and so on and so forth. And what we did was really, it made the right-wing conservative fundamentalist very, very afraid. And as a result, he said, the 60s invented what this was to become, this country as we know it today. You know?
Yes,
So,
unfortunately, that's what we're having to experience.
Yeah.
But it's right. It's true.
I mean, it's obviously just one thing, but still.
No, but I mean, it contributed because
thing.
there was incredible antipathy towards those of us that wanted to experience an experiment in some way, to see a better thing to see, is as simple as I can put it, you know, than what we were seeing every day. So a lot of people hated Leary and us, you know, but, you know, that's typical, isn't it? C'est la vie. You know, you come up with some way of dealing with it that's not the status quo, and those that are very attached to the status quo are not interested in these things, and this holds true in 2025 too. But as Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash and Chris Christopherson said in their concerts, "We are still around. We are still here." Thank you.
Still here. Yeah. Thanks
I
to
like
you to
I
be
like to
still
quote
here.
them. I love to quote them. I don't know why.
Imagine.
Sorry.
Still hanging in there, Willie. David, thank you for joining me. And that was fun, everybody. We shall see you next week, and go to go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling in this case. And we'll certainly give a link to William Richards, and we thank him, because it's quite a beautiful book, Sacred Knowledge, and there'll be a link there, and links to maybe some of the other stuff that we've been talking about, maybe a little link to Leary and Alpert from back in the day. And we've been, really investigating that ourselves, Ram Dass's perspective on the utility of psychedelics. So, just go there, and I should take advantage of all the other podcasts that are there, and we'll see you next week on Mindrolling. Bye, Dan.
Bye-bye.